So in a previous video, we did a teardown of a NEC PC 8300. I thought in this video we'd take a look at this Radio Shack Model 100. I believe it was also manufactured by NEC. We did kind of a side-by-side comparison in the other video, the keyboard and everything, and they're laid out pretty similar. I don't have any AA batteries to throw in here, so we're going to rely on the DC jack on the side. It's labeled DC 6 volts. On the PC 8300, the center pin was negative. On the DC jack, which is kind of unusual, usually the center pin is positive in most applications. I'm going to assume that to be true here as well. If I can get the battery cover off. Oh, I just had it off a little while ago. We'll take the continuity tester to it and just see if we can verify that. So looking in the battery connector, the assumption is the batteries are all in series to get 6 volts. I can see that this negative is hooked to this positive, to this negative, to this positive, to this negative, to this positive. And I'm doing that because that ultimately shows that this is where the positive voltage comes from the battery into the system, and this is where the negative comes from. And so I have the power switch on and I'm on the positive. And you can hear the beeping. I'm touching the outer connector, so what would connect to the barrel. I'm touching inside where it would connect to the barrel here, and the positive there. And I can see that the outside of that barrel is indeed positive. I would expect to be able to touch here and get ground, and I'm not. But I think I know enough here based on what I've heard there to know that the adapter is set up for outside negative center barrel or outside positive center barrel negative, which is how I've got this jumper together. I don't remember what voltage I have the adapter on. Let me take it down to 6 volts. And hopefully we can plug this thing in, it'll turn on. Switches to the off position. And nothing. So that's not a good sign. Now there is a fair amount of corrosion from leaking batteries in here. And maybe that's caused a problem down inside. I don't know. Shoot. Yeah, the contrast does nothing. The low battery light doesn't come on. It's just very dead. Answer originates, so that's modem control. Well, at this point, let's open it up, take a look inside, see if we can determine what's going on. There's a compartment here on the bottom, which I'm sure is for the ROMs. There's the Ultimate ROM 2 Traveling Software Incorporated. It's an interesting little holder that it's in. It's got somebody's name inside who used to own this, and I believe that this will just pop up out like so. So it's actually an Eeprom. Really interesting. It's got that little flexi circuit board that the Eeprom is wrapped in. It ultimately exposes copper contacts along the sides. It goes down into the socket. That's kind of an interesting connection. Memory battery on and off. Just out of curiosity, let's turn that off and try power here again. I don't expect it to make a difference. Again, nothing. So whether the unit is defective, whether I've got the power wrong, who knows? But let's go ahead and crack the case screws out and see what we've got. So, and of course, in the sea of screwdrivers, I'm not seeing the screwdriver I want. Always entertaining to not have the tool you want in the pile of tools that you're using. Didn't roll off onto the floor. Feels like too big a screwdriver. That feels too small. I don't want to strip these. They are machine threaded, so I'm going to assume at this point, at least for these, there's brass inserts. These are already a much smaller screw than we had on the PC 8300 that we tore apart in the other video. Is that enough to separate the case? Do we have latches someplace? No, it's coming apart. It looks like it folds open very much the same way the 8300 did. It's very similar inside. Let's go ahead and disconnect these cables. Very similar construction. The keyboard looks very similar. The LCD looks very similar. This has got a different brace bar on the keyboard. We'll look at that closer when we tear the keyboard down. Let's see if we can get the two halves here separated. So there are more wires, I think, on the black cable here than there were on the other one, and I think that's because this has got more switches on it. It's actually got a ribbon cable to the LCD and not that kind of flex cable that the other one had. It's got some interesting RAM modules in here. Looks to me like the construction is very similar. We've got an ADC85 processor, an Intersil IM6402 that I believe is a UART, an MSN 81C55, which I believe again is a PIO, 3 parallel IO ports. So that's very similar. There is a battery here, and you can see the corrosion on the battery. The battery is definitely leaked. We will remove that while we have it apart. For now, I'll set this aside and take a look to see if we can see how this comes apart. So I can see that the red lead here does go to that outer connector. So let's do a little bit of poking around on looking for a TTL device 373. We have a TTL device here, so that should, now let's actually get to ground. That will be, if I can get onto it. Let's see here if we think that the black lead is ground. Not having a whole lot of luck. assume most likely that pin there is ground, and I'm well, let's just go ahead. Is that unplugged from there? So this does have a switch in it to switch in the batteries if the adapter's not plugged in. You can get back on what I believe to be ground there. Just having no luck here at all. Switch was over here, and on is in that direction. Go ahead and just make sure that this is wired the way I think it is. Yep, I've got 6 volts with the outside being positive. On this ROM, let's see if we find 5 volts, and we don't. So the question becomes, is the barrel on this too small to switch, or if we got an issue in the power supply? Put that on. I think that 470 microfarad cap there is going to be a bulk decoupling, and that's positive pin. And I'm not seeing any voltage making it to that cap. This is what? Did I just measured 12 volts. Not in a place I expected to find 12 volts. DC 6 volt. How would I have had 12 volts there? That doesn't make any sense. That should be a ground connection. Extremely confusing. Extremely confusing here. What's going on here? I think I'm going to approach this in a different way. Hopefully I haven't fried this thing. I don't know where that 12 volts must be coming back from the power supply. There's just no other place it could come from. We have 6 volts DC here. 6.2 volts DC. So why I'm seeing 12 volts makes absolutely no sense to me. What we're going to do is we're going to apply the 12 volts, or the 6 volts would be the batteries from a DC power supply. Get some clip leads in place here. That should be the battery positive. Power supply is currently set to 12 volts. Let me bring it down to 6 volts. Power supply positive. Power supply negative. And I'm just going to look for some gross DC voltages inside. Wow, this is really confusing. I don't have the power supply turned on. Bring on channel 1. I do believe I heard a little switcher wake up there. I guess I didn't. We have no DC voltage there at all. So there's the 6 volts from the battery. And it's plus 6 there. That would be coming down the red lead. There's 6 volts to the board. The top of that cap blown out. Top of that cap looks like it's blown out. Might have a dead, I think we've got a dead power supply here. That cap may have vented at some point. Look a little closer at that. Or maybe not. Looked like there was a pinhole in it, but it's just where the number 6 is stamped in, so. Well, we're certainly not seeing 5 volts make it out into the system. Switched on. Well, that's a shame. There's obviously a problem probably with the of course, well, we know we're getting DC voltage in. Most likely something in this little power supply control circuit has failed. So before I go any further, we will remove these guys, and I'm going to go ahead and pull the PCB out. And we'll just take a look at it. It's a shame that I do believe somebody's had this apart before based on how loose these screws are. Hidden screw back here with that interesting little standoff with a little rubber boot on top of it. Isn't that cute? I'm assuming the keyboard pushes up against that. I have a screw over here I missed. Looks like the crystal speed is the same, 4.915 2 megahertz, so it's the same speed crystal we had in the 8300. So the reset switch is catching there, and the battery terminals. It's interesting, a little rubber guy's boot has slid out of something. Definitely not as nice a construction as the 8300. Come on. I'd like you to pull up out of there. There you go. There we go. At least the ground lead. This came off of. We now see where these went. Interesting, there's not a full set of them. Again, it really looks to me like somebody's been inside of this before. The nasty black here is actually where the plastic tabs here are just set down in. This board obviously wasn't clean. There was flux everywhere. No idea what happened there. Let me fire up the soldering pencil and we'll get that battery at least off the board. It doesn't look to me like the leakage from the battery has made its way down onto the actual PCB. Definitely a leaky battery. What is the rating on it? Positive 3.6 volt, 50 milliamp hour. That at least removes it, so we can't do any additional damage. Man, the flux on this board is really nasty. These little hybrid memory units are interesting. They're on a purple ceramic substrate, which is kind of cool. So we're not getting power delivered to the board at all. Start with the obvious switch. The switch itself isn't bad. That's interesting. There it is. So the wires haven't rotted through on the spring connectors. Yeah, not nearly as well built as that 8300 was. Yeah, not nearly as nice a construction. Double-sided board, you can see all the flux here on the bottom of the board. I don't think it was conformal coated. None of the solder joints look to be conformal coated. No, it really is just flux from I'm assuming a wave soldering of some sort. It's just not pretty. Pretty in any sense. Oops. Throw it out. Not super impressed with the quality of this. Of course, it was built to a price for Radio Shack. Without finding a schematic and working through this little power supply here, I'm sure it's a little switcher and has to display multiple voltages for like the LCD. And of course, it may all be 5-volt logic. Why you would then have that massive power supply is beyond me. So it must require multiple voltages that are being derived through little DC to DC converter there. There's one inductor there, a little transformer. So yeah, just not seeing a whole lot that is obviously a problem. Well, this isn't going to be much of a teardown. The back shell actually has a metal plate here for RF, and that's how it gets connected to ground, is the little green jumper wire here. That's substantially different. The 8300 had that kind of aluminized board that flex wrapped around. This looks nearly identical to the 8300. I'm not sure if this is bringing power up, or maybe the buzzer that jumps over to the actual buzzer since it's in the front. You know, the keyboard looks almost identical. I don't see a need to tear this down and look any further. It's going to be pretty much identical to the 8300. It's a shame it doesn't seem to want to power up. At least there's brass inserts, so there's a little bit of quality there. It's not just self-tapping screws. Now let's see if we can get the main PCB back in. The little filler plates for the switches are in the proper places. The spring contacts for the batteries. And draw it back into place. That little ground jumper for the metal back here is reconnected. Really, it's just a matter of putting the screws in. Boy, the 8300 inside was just really pretty. In my opinion, well done. And this is just kind of, yeah, you know, built to a cost. Is what it is, I guess. Still haven't found my good screwdriver. Well, at least we got the battery out of it. That's a good thing. I don't remember at all where I got this unit from. Whether it was given to me, found surplus, eBay purchase. I just know it's been up on a shelf for ages. I forgot I had it until I was digging for something else and came across it in the 8300 and went, a little something for a teardown video today. So this why I appear to be short a screw. Yeah, mechanically this just isn't nearly as nice as the 8300. Little plastic support for the back of the keyboard. Must be a real-time clock. That looks like a little 32.768 kilohertz crystal sitting there. Little watch crystal. I believe I've hit all the screws. Our jack goes back in there. Cable for the LCD. This one's a little stiffer for some reason, but it is walking in. At least it's trying to. There it went. Doing flush, doing flush. This picked up right here. Yeah, not a whole lot of love here. Just because I have to try again. Yeah, completely dead. Completely dead. Where'd the ground lead go from the power supply? Power switch is off. I expect exact same thing. And that's what we got. Well, we got a peek inside. That was about all we could get out of this. I will finish buttoning this back up. And just no reason to go any further with the video. Anyhow, we'll talk soon. Thanks for watching.